Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, September 22nd, 2025. Ray McGovern is here on the latest in Tulsi Gabbard versus the deep state and other matters involving the intelligence community. But first, this. Why do so many financial experts call silver the most undervalued asset today? Because silver is essential to the future. From solar tech and electric vehicles to the explosive growth of artificial intelligence. Demand is rising fast, and yet silver is still trading at a bargain. With billions pouring into AI, silver prices have only one place to go, up. Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, says silver may be the most overlooked opportunity on the market and could double or triple by 2026. I believe in hard assets like this bar of silver. You can hold it in your hand or put it in your 401k or IRA. That's why I urge you to call my friends at Lear Capital and get their free report, The AI Revolution, and see why silver prices are set to soar. Call 800-511-4620, 800-511-4620, or go to LearJudgeNap.com. Don't wait. The government can print dollars, but it can't print silver. Ray McGovern, welcome here, my dear friend. Thank you very much for accommodating my schedule. More about this at the end of our segment, but Ray and I will meet in person for the first time after the many, many years we have worked together at a rally in Kingston, New York on Saturday. Scott Ritter and others will also be there. A rally for peace by Gerald Celente and his wonderful crew. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but of course I'm looking forward to it, my dear friend. Before we get to the deep state versus Tulsi Gabbard, or Tulsi Gabbard versus the deep state, however you want to look at it, what is your take on the now nearly universal recognition of Palestine as a free and independent and sovereign state?
Well, the proof will be in the pudding, Judge. If they vote on a Uniting for Peace resolution, then this will mean something. I'm from Missouri. You have to show me. When Keith Strommer changes his mind and says nice rhetoric, I mean, that doesn't really show me a lot. So let's see how things evolve this week. My God, it's going to happen this week. We'll see if there's enough support against what Israel is doing to unite for peace and send in peacekeepers or people that will suppress the genocide. That's not impossible. Let's see if it happens.
Netanyahu, of course, is adamant. Here's what he said actually earlier this morning in Israel. Chris, cut number 2.
We will have to fight both at the UN and in all other arenas against the false propaganda directed at us and the calls for the establishment of a Palestinian state, which would endanger our existence and serve as an absurd reward for terrorism. The international community will hear from us on this matter in the coming days.
Of course, a Palestinian state existed in 1948 before the Zionists weren't Israelis. The Zionists stole the land and expelled 800,000 people.
Yeah, and the British helped that along, of course, and stood by idly while many of them were assassinated in hotels and the like. They just didn't want anything to do with it. They didn't want to wash their hands of the whole thing. Well, it's not possible now. The issue is joined. Now, the question is whether Netanyahu will get the message from Trump that, no, this is a bridge too far. Do not attack Iran because we will not be with you this time. Now, if that happens, all these predictions about Iran being the next target of Israel, well, hopefully they'll be misplaced. Hopefully, Iran will not be attacked that way because the Iranians have a deterrent for the first time in 4 millennia, right? These Persians, they have a deterrent, okay? Now, would Netanyahu go off half-cocked anyway? Yes, he would if he was starting to lose. And that's my concern, of course. In extremis, he would probably use his nuclear weapon, just the small ones, his nuclear weapons. But who would dispute the notion that a fellow committing genocide and forced starvation would shrink in extremis from using whatever else he has, and that includes nuclear weapons. That's why I hope that the U.S. policymakers are smart enough to tell him now, forget about it. We're not going to support you. If you go ahead, you're finished.
I've asked this question of Alistair Crook and you and Larry Johnson and Scott Ritter and Colonel McGregor and Colonel Wilkerson and Professor Sachs and Professor Mearsheimer and all of our regular guests. Does Trump control Netanyahu, or does Netanyahu control Trump?
This week or next couple of weeks will show what the answer to that is. I'm not one that thinks that Trump has much influence on Netanyahu. It's very bizarre here, a major nuclear state being jerked around by this fellow in Israel. But if you look at the record, you see that apparently Trump sees not much leeway to crush Netanyahu. And as I've said before, it could be that Netanyahu has a kind of blackmail material on Trump that would send Trump spinning, and not only Netanyahu, into jail for that bridal suite that they've proposed for his wife and him once he leaves power. He's at risk. He's at personal risk. We shouldn't forget that.
Do we still have an international rules-based order? Is there any moral basis to the behavior of the Israeli government or the American government?
Well, Judge, as much as I've looked and Googled in libraries and all, there's no definition for the international rules-based order. It was all made up by these well-heeled people named Sullivan and Blinken. They concocted it out of thin air, and it was supposed to substitute for the UN and other orderly legal regimes instituted and implemented after World War II. So in other words, there isn't a international rules-based system other than what Blinken and Sullivan allude to when they say, well, we're going to do this or we're going to do that. And now the rules, the important thing here, and what I find somewhat hopeful, is that the Russians and the Chinese still place considerable merit in working through this international organization, and they're loath to violate the laws and regulations of this institution willy-nilly, like the West has been. So there's hope there. And given the fact that the Russians are definitely winning in Ukraine, and that the Israelis, I don't think they're going to prevail in this one if they latch out, try to attack Iran. I think that the Russians and the Chinese have already told Iran, look, we're with you this time. We're going to make quiet overtures to Trump and say, look, Trump, look, we don't want you to support Israel. So make sure you tell them this is the last time you supported them back in June, was it? You're not going to do that anymore. That's the only salvation here.
So Alistair Crook, Scott Ritter, and Colonel McGregor are of the view that, I think you might agree with this, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. The tide of support for Israel is turning radically against Israel in the United States. Hence the Israeli urge to attack Iran sooner rather than later, before the tide is overwhelmingly against Israel, and Trump will have difficulty politically justifying a backup position in the attack. Agree?
I share that view. I would just point out that we're already there, okay? Trump doesn't need any more dissonance to face into. He knows his problems. This whole Charlie Kirk thing, these young people, these MAGA people, they don't want to have another war, especially there in that part of the world. So I think the time is now. In other words, the gauntlet has been thrown down. Whether the Israelis will listen to Trump, that's another question. They probably think they can hit out after Iran, and Trump will have no no option other than to come to their support. So Trump needs to make it publicly known right now that he doesn't want Israel to attack Iran. It's high time he did that. That, in my view, would be enough.
Do Russia and China have an interest in stopping the slaughter in Gaza?
Well, I think all nations do except Israel. I mean, it's such a gross violation of international law. And the precedent, of course, is the slaughter of 6 million Jews back when I was young during World War II. You let this become sort of a normal thing. You normalize this kind of thing. And there's no telling where this could lead. So yes, and they've been very, very, one thing that people don't know is that the Chinese representative, the top lawyer in Geneva, said, look, Hamas had every right to do what it did on September 7th, okay? Under international law, it has every right to fight the occupier, to include using violence, okay? The Chinese representative. Now, I haven't seen the Russians go that far, but that is the rule. Occupiers don't have any rights if people want to throw them off. So that's international law. The Chinese have been very explicit about that. I think that most of the world are behind the kind of solution that will prevent Netanyahu from wreaking more havoc.
Shortly before, or as he was about to leave, shortly before he left, or as he was about to leave Moscow for New York, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov made some very interesting statements, which you pointed out to me just a few minutes before airtime. And so we don't have the actual clip of him saying it, but I'm deeply grateful for what you found. What did he say? What's the essence of what my friend, I had a very happy 3-hour encounter with him and a subsequent communication, Sergei Lavrov said about Donald Trump?
He's a very serious man, okay? And this was sort of the precursor to his appearance at the UN. He's giving this interview to a very well-respected wire service. And he says, look, it's going to be Donald Trump and his team have repeatedly demonstrated, including publicly, that they understand the need to address the root causes of this conflict in Ukraine, okay? Trump has stated publicly on multiple occasions that drawing Ukraine into NATO was a mistake, okay? These aspirations must be set aside and security must be built on different principles. And he takes a dig at, it's a funny kind of dig at the Ukraine. He said, like the Nazis, a generation ago, the Ukrainians are destroying books, but they're not burning them. Here's Lavrov. The only difference is that the Nazis burn them, while the Ukrainians, who are very tight people, they sell them for recycling. So you have this very serious pronouncement to a big channel in Russia. What else? I'll just say one more thing. Look, here's what he goes on. He says, look, when Trump says this is Joe Biden's war, okay, what does that mean? It means that he is not going to give priority attention to resolving it. Oh, okay. So it's Biden's war. He knows, that Trump knows, that the Ukraine crisis was deliberately created and Russia had no choice other than to mount the special military operation. Now, we're willing to make calculated concessions, anticipating future maneuvers. So we can get together on this stuff. But the big thing is that since Alaska, Donald Trump has unambiguously advocated not for an unconditional ceasefire ultimatum, but for a durable, sustainable settlement represents a significant White House decision. I see no indication that they have retreated on this issue. So
that is, in my view, profound Ray,
Yeah,
that you said that, and you may have been right all along. And maybe it was the 4 or 5 hours they all spent together in Alaska that triggered this view of Trump and this realization of the view of Trump by the Russians.
yeah. The fly in the ointment, of course, Judge, is that is Trump his own person? Can he
Right.
do these things? And one symptom of what he has to fight against is this battle royale that's going on now by the deep state and the media and the Democrats, to make sure that the deep state is not exposed and that people like the CIA director John Brennan and the FBI director James Comey don't end up in jail. Now, Tulsi Gabbard has the book on them, and she released several chapters of that book, Fly in the Ointment. Not many Americans know about it because it has been sort of disregarded or suppressed in the mainstream media. Now they're coming after her, okay? I don't know if she's going to survive. If she doesn't survive, I'm Vladimir Putin. I'm saying, oh my God, what kind of flexibility does the President of the United States have when he wants to do something really important?
When you say, Ray, they're coming after her, who do you mean when you say they, and what will they do to her by coming after her?
Well, there have been a whole host of White House advisors talking to places like the Daily Beast about
Right.
how terrible it is that Tulsi Gabbard took away the security clearances of 37 people who were all good guys, including the chief of staff of Adam Schiff. He was a wonderful guy. Well, you know, I just am surprised as hell that Tulsi moved so dramatically, so unequivocally, and now she's gonna face the consequences. And whether Trump throws her under the bus under the bus or not, and I think there's an equal possibility he will. That will show the Russians that, wow, we got to be really careful dealing with this guy because he's not his own man. These people that surround him have no good intentions toward us, and the military is part of that military, industrial, congressional, democratic media complex.
Does the intelligence community play any role in this recognition of the Palestinian state?
I don't
In other
think
words,
so.
did the CIA tell the president that they learned from MI6 that this is what the British are going to do long before they did it?
I'm not sure. MI6 and CIA are very close, joined at the hip. But there have been many instances having to do with Ukraine itself where I think the CIA was kept in the dark until MI6 had consummated the operation, so to speak. But it's not really a matter of intelligence, it's a matter of policy. And if Trump doesn't see the handwriting on the wall now, with the whole world turned against him, and Putin sort of fighting a defensive maneuver for Trump, saying, you know, when we were all together there in Beijing, there wasn't one word of criticism of President Trump. Now that's strange credulity, but the fact that he says that he's trying to leave open all the avenues so that he can cajole Trump and say, look, we have no evil intentions toward you. Try to overcome your opposition, and we can deal because we have flexibility, is what Lavrov says in this pre-UN interview.
I wonder where Keith Kellogg is in all of this. You remember that absurd clip that you and Larry and I analyzed and laughed over, where he says Russia's losing, Russia's losing, Russia's losing, and he goes on to articulate his own ignorance. But he may be whispering this stuff into Trump's ear.
Well, I'm sure he's trying to. What disturbed me most about that whole thing was he claimed that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff shares his views about this whole thing where Russia is not winning, that we're going to win, and that, it's just really awful because this is the intelligence that was served up to Biden, for God's sake. And the fact that Tulsi Gabbard is cashiered many of the people who were working on Russian foreign policy because of their idiotic recommendations with respect to Ukraine and everything else, telling Biden, oh, yeah, that Putin has already lost. His army has been revealed to be inept. All this stuff was really crazy. Who did that stuff? We know the names now. Scott Ritter has done a wonderful, wonderful article revealing some of the names of the top women who were in charge of the Russia mission. Now, there are equal number of idiot males, of course, but these two happen to be women. And there's another woman, a deputy National Intelligence Office, that's pretty high ranking, okay, who tried to go to all the committees, tried to go to all the inspectors general and tell them, look, John Brennan is trying to get me to write something I don't believe. Please, please intervene. They all turned her away. Well, now Tulsi has got her, and Tulsi has said all kinds of other people are coming out of the woodwork to tell the real story about how John Brennan pretty much concocted this whole thing all by himself with 5 very malleable analysts that were trained to hate Russia from the beginning. And we see how they came out in that January 6, 2017 intelligence, community intelligence assessment, which was not a community and it wasn't intelligent. Yeah, it was an assessment, but it was based on phony information. The New York Times quoted it. Here's one thing. These guys won Pulitzers for printing this trash, okay? Now, that's some money attached to those. Well, the Pulitzer Committee say, oh my God, give us some your money back. I don't think so, but something has to be done about these guys that feasted off what they were told by the PR people at the CIA and at NSA and at DIA and mostly the FBI.
Well,
it was a charade. It was a very consequential charade because it ended up with most Americans believing that the Russians were the devil incarnate, right?
Right.
And if Trump wanted to send troops into Ukraine right now, most people would be still persuaded. Look, they put Trump in. Now he knows what he's doing. He's good. They probably would support it. Yeah. That's why it's
when Director Gabbard removed the security clearances of people, were these active duty agents or were these retired people like Jack Brennan?
Some of them, well, both, Judge.
Okay, so if you are an active duty agent like you once were,
right,
and your security clearance is removed, can you keep your job?
Well, I go to the library and I stack the books there. I mean, they won't fire me. They'll let me live out my tenure. But no, I can't do my job. I can't analyze what's going on in Russia. So it's just a serious thing, but it's so appallingly transparent that when they take the security clearance away from the fellow that John Ratcliffe was going to appoint a very important job and then reveal his name. Give me a break. Everyone knows who this guy was, what he did before, and he deserves richly to have his security clearance revoked.
Is John Ratcliffe, the director of CIA, adverse to Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence? Is he part of and on the side of the deep state?
You always ask the most entrenchant questions there, Judge. I don't know, but it's very suspicious. Now, when Ratcliffe knew that Tulsi was going to release all this stuff showing chapter and verse about how the deep state, the media, and the Dems did this stuff called Russiagate, John Ratcliffe did a sort of a preemptive move. He put out a memo that was drafted by the head of intelligence in the CIA, and the trade crap was really pretty good. Actually, it was very, very good. And so he tried to tame this thing down, tried to preempt it. It was silly. I mean, he couldn't preempt it. He didn't name any names. He just said, "Well, no, we reviewed this, or the intelligence bit. It was not bad. Well, give me a break. It was awful. It was contrived. It was made out of whole cloth. We pointed it out at the time. We couldn't get any hearing. Your program was not in being at that time, Judge. I regret that very much."
Sounds to me as though Ratcliffe is adverse to her.
Well, it's an old problem. He is, in theory, subordinate to her. Okay, she's at the top level, director of national intelligence, so the FBI intelligence, CIA, NSA, DIA, they all are supposed to be guided by Tulsi Gabbard, to include giving Gabbard pre-warning for covert action operations. Now, that's in the law. Okay, whether they do that or not, I don't know. So it's a notional thing that she's in charge, but Ratcliffe has got all these people hangovers from hangers on from other regimes, and Tulsi has just hit the surface here in dismissing the major ones. Now, that said, I have to add that I was always reluctant to say the CIA should be abolished and throw it out, give the covert action to the Pentagon where it belongs, if anywhere. And I don't know what you do about the analysts. Maybe good luck in setting up an independent agency. But then I thought, oh my God, there are still honest people there. They were the ones that said Iran has not worked on a nuclear weapon since 2003, repeating that every year until this year, March 2003, 2023. No, March 2025. And what? Well, do we know that anymore? We're not sure. Why? Because the IAEA folks are out of there. But during that entire time, from 2007 until earlier this year, March, when Tulsi Gabbard gave the briefing to Congress, they were stalwart in saying there is no evidence that Iran is working on a nuclear weapon. Do not be deceived. Yeah, they're working on refining uranium, plutonium, but they're not working on a weapon. And if you don't have a weapon, you don't really have a threat. So what am I saying? I'm saying that I said, Ray, it's good that you didn't decide to advocate the destruction of the whole agency. These guys are honest. And now Tulsi Gabbard tells us that all kinds of other people are coming out of the woodwork, spilling the beans on what John Brennan did. And what he did was the worst kind of sin that you could possibly do. It was akin to what his sponsor, George Tenet, did before Iraq, served up information that was, well, as John Rockefeller put it, what did he say? It was contradicted. It was even non-existent was his last adjective. Non-existent intelligence. What's that look like?
Yeah, made up out of whole cloth. Thank you, Ray. What a fascinating conversation. Now, what are you and I doing with Scott Ritter on Saturday?
Well, we're speaking under the sponsorship of Gerald Celente. I'm delighted to be thrown in with all these folks, and I'm going to be up there, and I'm looking forward to meeting you, Judge. It'd be kind of nice to meet you in person, not having done that so far. And we have, we have Scott Ritter be there, Dennis Kucinich. We'll be with Dennis in the days prior. Roger Waters, my God, we'll have him piped in. It's going to be a peace and freedom rally of the kind that Gerald Celente is very well prepared to do.
Well, only Celente could pull this off. It's this Saturday, September 27th, starting at 2 p.m. in Kingston, New York, which is about a 2-hour ride north of New York City. Very, very old town. Arguably the birthplace of democracy in the New World, in a beautiful garden and an outdoor field. If the weather cooperates, you'll see us all: Celente, Ritter, Joe Loria, Dennis Kucinich, Ray McGovern, Randy Credico, and Roger Waters via a video feed. And as odd as this business is, where you work with people all the time, you and I have worked together twice a week for 4 years now, and had many communications before that. We've never been in the same room at the same time. On Saturday, we shall.
A word on Gerald Celente. Okay, the reason he can do all these things and do them so well is because he's from the Bronx.
And if you ask him, He will tell you.
I have to ask him what neighborhood, because we may have grown up together.
Wow. Thank you, Ray. But before Saturday, I will see you Friday with Larry Johnson for the Intelligence Community Roundtable as usual. All the best, my dear friend. Thank you.
You too, Judge. Thanks.
And the aforementioned Larry, of course, is coming up here. Larry Johnson at 11:30 this morning. And Harrison Berger, what is the CIA doing to your civil liberties? And what about this TikTok deal? Who's going to control the algorithms? At 2 o'clock this afternoon. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.